All right, are you ready for this? Buckle up, because we're diving deep into the Matt Gaetz allegations. You guys wanted the full story, and it's a doozy. Alleged sex trafficking, shady money stuff, drug use, you name it. This one has it all.
It really makes you think about those lines between someone's personal life and what they do, in their job, especially in DC. I mean, it's a total pressure cooker there.
No kidding, right? And get this, we've got a whole mountain of sources to dig through. A House Ethics Committee report, articles, social media, even court documents. So let's start at the very beginning. Back in 2017, Gates got tight with this Florida tax collector, Joel Greenberg. Greenberg, well, he was known for throwing these wild parties, lots of young women, and that's where seekingarrangement.com enters the picture.
Oh yeah, Seeking Arrangement. That's that site that, well, it connects, I guess you could say, wealthy older guys with younger women looking for financial support, gifts, companionship, the whole sugar dating thing.
Exactly. And it turns out Greenberg was a regular there. He eventually introduced a bunch of the women he met on the site to Gates. And if you believe Greenberg, they'd often split the costs for, well, let's just say drugs, hotels, and girls.
Wow.
Yeah, and the House Ethics report even points to this one instance in July 2017 where Gates dropped over $6,000 on a Miami rental. A few days later, boom, Greenberg reimburses him $1,600. They even posted pics of themselves out to dinner with someone else from that trip.
It's interesting. Seeking Arrangement might be legal, but a lot of people have criticized it, for basically making it easier for prostitution, sex trafficking, all because of the power dynamics. Some say just shut the whole thing down.
I can see why they'd say that.
Hmm.
Now, adding to all this is the whole money trail. Gates made tens of thousands of dollars in payments to different women over a few years. We're talking Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, even checks.
Here's the kicker. The ethics report says Gates used this fake email account for some payments. At first it was for, like, buying weed, but later it was for paying women. And get this, as time went on, those descriptions for the payments got vaguer and vaguer, almost like he was trying to hide something.
Oh, totally. Like at first it was food and travel, and then it became just stuff. So weird.
Yeah, and that shift in language happened right around when Greenberg got indicted on his own charges.
Yeah.
It's almost like Gates realized things were getting serious and decided to be more careful.
You've got to wonder what he was thinking at that point. But let's hear from the women. A bunch of them testified before the House Ethics Committee, and a good number of them were pretty open about the whole, well, transactional nature of their relationships with Gates.
One woman even flat out said that 99% of the time Gates and I were hanging out, there was sex involved. I mean, that doesn't sound like just casual friends, you know?
Not at all. And then there are these texts between Gates's girlfriend at the time and some of these women. In one, she tells them that the guys, meaning Gates and Greenberg, are a little limited in their cash flow this weekend and suggests it be a customer appreciation week.
It's crazy, right? It's like they were running a business or something,
Huh.
offering deals, but the product was sex. And that's where the whole thing gets ethically and legally problematic.
No doubt about it. And speaking of legal issues, we have to talk about that really serious allegation. Gates's alleged relationship with a 17-year-old, Victim A, as she's called in the report. It all supposedly started in July 2017 at a party at lobbyist Christopher Dorworth's house. Multiple witnesses say Gates was there, even though he denies it.
Yeah, and Victim A says she got $400 from Gates that night, and that she thought it was payment for sex. And in Florida, it's a felony, like big time illegal, for someone 24 or older to have sex with a 16 or 17-year-old.
Right, and the law in Florida is, well, it's strict. Even if a minor lied about their age, doesn't matter. Someone like Gates could still get charged.
Exactly. Whether they knew the minor's real age is irrelevant. It's strict liability, meaning just doing it, the act itself, is a crime, regardless of what they thought.
Gates says he never had sex with a minor, but he won't answer questions about Victim A, even under oath. He does this a lot in the investigation, denies things broadly, but dodges the specifics.
Makes you wonder what he doesn't want people to know. Yeah.
For sure. Okay, let's shift gears to the drug use allegations. Gates says he doesn't do drugs, but again, there's evidence that suggests otherwise.
Like there are texts where he's asking for party favors, vitamins, rolls. That's all code for ecstasy or cocaine.
And it wasn't just talk. Witnesses have said they saw Gates use these drugs at parties. One woman even said she brought cocaine to a thing with Gates and saw him use it a bunch of times. Greenberg himself said he'd supply ecstasy at events and Gates would pay him back in cash.
It makes you wonder, was Gates giving drugs to these women too? Especially the younger ones. It's a disturbing thought, and even though the report doesn't say for sure, it definitely seems like a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good look. And then there's that whole Bahamas trip. Remember that one? September 2018, Gaetz, two other guys, six women. Most of them had, well, a history of, engaging in sexual activity with Gaetz for money. One woman even said she thought the trip itself was like a payment. Private planes, luxury places, the whole shebang.
And that's where the House gift rule becomes a factor.
Right.
This rule has strict limits on the gifts members of Congress can accept, especially travel on private planes. Usually, any flight on a non-commercial plane needs approval from the House Ethics Committee, especially if it costs more than $250.
Well, Gates flew back to Orlando from the Bahamas on his associate's private plane with three women, and he never told anyone about it, didn't seek approval, nothing.
And this wasn't just a one-time thing. There's evidence he flew on his buddy's private planes other times. Again, no disclosure, no approval.
He just didn't seem to care about the rules, especially when it came to these women. And there was also that whole thing where Gates had his congressional staff rush a passport for this woman he was sleeping with.
She wasn't even a constituent. It was so out of the ordinary for his office to do something like that. It just shows how he used his power and resources for personal favors.
Yeah, it's not a good look. So we've got these crazy parties, questionable money stuff, possible drug use, and misuse of official resources. But hold on, because things are about to get even messier. We're going to talk about those obstruction allegations next. That's where Gaetz really tried to, well, derail the whole investigation. It seemed like the minute the House Ethics Committee started looking into things, Gaetz went into overdrive to try and, well, stall them, discredit them, the whole works.
He really did, yeah. Accusations, all sorts of tactics, and just flat out refused to work with them.
Like, remember when he demanded they investigate supposed leaks to the media before he'd even talked to them?
Oh, classic. Classic move. Trying to make it look like he was the one being targeted, right?
Yeah.
Instead of answering for the accusations.
And he kept saying the Department of Justice had cleared him, even though they never actually said that. They wouldn't give the committee any information about their investigation either. He even said the committee had no business even looking into him because the DOJ had already done it.
Which, come on, that's totally wrong.
Yeah.
The House Ethics Committee is a completely separate thing. They have to investigate misconduct allegations against members of Congress. It doesn't matter if there's a criminal investigation happening or not.
He totally knew that. You can tell from the report. But he just kept saying it over and over, hoping it would stop them, I guess. And then there's that whole thing with the documents. First, he says it's too much work to hand them over. Then all of a sudden, he dumps a ton of random files on them like, there you go, I cooperated.
So obvious, right? Trying to look transparent, but really just overwhelming them with paperwork, hoping they'd miss the important stuff.
It's like a kid trying to hide a bad grade in a stack of good ones. Sometimes it works, It creates doubt, buys time, might even help you avoid getting in trouble.
Well, it worked for Gaetz. He dragged it out long enough to resign a few weeks before the House could actually vote on any punishments. Resigning basically let him run out the clock, left the committee with no power.
It's crazy, isn't it? It feels like he gamed the system and got away with it.
Yeah, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth for sure. I mean, this case really shows how we need better ways to hold our elected officials accountable, even when they're actively trying to, block investigations. Maybe the Ethics Committee needs more power, more authority to make people cooperate and punish them when they don't.
Maybe resigning shouldn't automatically end an ethics investigation. If someone is accused of doing something really wrong, shouldn't they still face the consequences, even if they're not in office anymore?
That's a great point. It's definitely something to think about. I mean, this whole situation shows how vulnerable our system is. We have to protect it from people who try to, use it for their own benefit.
So what do you think? What does this whole mess say about the Republican Party? Are they going to stick by him or try to distance themselves? And what about the voters in his district? Do they still trust him?
Those are tough ones.
Yeah.
No easy answers, right? But one thing's for sure. This scandal has definitely had an impact. It's going to have ripple effects for a while, I think.
It's all a bit depressing, honestly. It makes you wonder if our political system even works.
I get it. It's hard to see how people abuse power like that, especially when they're supposed to be, upholding the law.
Yeah.
But it's also a wake-up call, right? We can't just sit back and assume everything's fine. We have to pay attention, be involved, and hold our leaders accountable, no matter how much power they have.
Totally. But, there's another part of this that people don't talk about much. What about the women? They've been through so much, personally, publicly. Some of them have said they felt used, manipulated. Especially the younger ones, they were more vulnerable.
Right. You're right. They got caught up in something they might not have understood, especially with the whole power dynamic thing. Remember, Some of them are even afraid of Gaetz retaliating against them.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these scandals aren't just political games, real people get hurt, real consequences.
Exactly. There's been talk about lawsuits, but who knows what'll happen with that. Even if they win, it doesn't erase what they went through.
It's a mess. And honestly, it's really unsettling. Not just what Gates did, but that this kind of thing can happen in the first place.
It's important to look at those bigger issues. This forces us to face some hard truths about our society and the people we choose to lead us.
One thing that really struck me in the report was how Gates used people like Greenberg to pay the women for him.
Interesting, isn't it? Was that like a deliberate strategy? Create some distance so he could deny it?
Could be. And then he started being all vague with the payment descriptions, like he was trying to make them look less suspicious.
Didn't that happen right around the time Greenberg got indicted? Makes you think Gaetz was getting nervous, trying to cover his tracks.
Like he was trying to disappear but stay in plain sight, slowly erasing any evidence.
Kind of, yeah. But luckily, the House Ethics Committee saw what he was doing, put together this amazing report.
They did a good job. They were like a watchdog. Even though they couldn't really do much once he resigned.
It's frustrating that the DOJ didn't work with him more, though.
Yeah, that was weird. Why wouldn't they cooperate? What were they trying to protect? It almost feels like powerful people like Gates can just, I don't know, get away with things.
Makes you feel uneasy, right? Like there's one set of rules for them and one for everyone else.
And remember how the DOJ asked the Ethics Committee to pause their investigation? That just delayed everything even more. Gave Gates more time to, hide stuff.
It's a mess. It really makes you think about accountability and transparency, right? In our government.
We might never know everything, but we have to keep asking questions.
Totally. We can't let these people act like they're above the law. This is exactly why we need more oversight, stronger ways to hold them accountable.
The Ethics Committee did a great job, shining a light on what Gates was doing. But it feels like there's still more to this story.
There is. What do you think would have happened if he hadn't resigned? Would the House have kicked him out? Would he have faced charges?
Tough to say. Interesting to think about, though. But one thing's for sure, this whole thing has definitely changed the political scene, right? Started conversations about power, accountability, and, where's the line between your personal life and your job?
And don't forget about the long-term consequences for Gaetz. Even though he's not facing charges right now, this scandal is going to stick with him. It'll be interesting to see if he can ever really recover from this.
That's a good point. It also brings up the whole role of the media in all this. Gaetz has said over and over that the press is biased against him, that they're spreading lies.
That's what politicians always do when they're in trouble, right? Try to attack the messenger instead of dealing with the actual issue.
But in this case, a lot of the reporting was backed up by what the Ethics Committee found.
Right.
That means the media was actually doing its job, holding Gaetz accountable.
Exactly. This whole case shows just how crucial a free press is, especially in a democracy. Journalists have to be able to investigate and report on these stories, even when they're controversial.
And they did their job here. Now it's up to us, the citizens, to decide what we do with this information. Are we going to demand more from our leaders? Are we going to push for more transparency and accountability?
That's what we have to figure out. This isn't just about Matt Gaetz. It's about the kind of society we want to live in and the kind of values we want our leaders to have.
So what now? How do we stop this from happening again?
Well, we could make the rules stricter for members of Congress. Tighter regulations on gifts, campaign money, how they spend taxpayer dollars.
Maybe we should rethink the statute of limitations for certain crimes, especially when it comes to abuse of power or sexual misconduct.
Totally agree. And we have to support a free press. Let them do their job and hold our leaders accountable without being afraid of getting in trouble.
In the end, it's on us, the voters. We have to know what's going on, be involved, and hold our elected officials responsible for what they do.
That's it. We can't just sit back and hope for the best. We have to demand better and be ready to fight for it.
So we've talked a lot about the allegations against Matt Gaetz, but let's focus on one thing that's really, troubling. His attempts to basically shut down the House Ethics Committee investigation.
Yeah, and he wasn't just, uncooperative, It was more like a whole plan to distract them, throw them off, and just ignore their authority.
It's like he used every trick in the book. Remember how he kept accusing them of leaking to the press? He even said they had to investigate those supposed leaks before he'd even talk to them.
Total diversion tactic, right? Trying to blame them and make it look like he was the victim instead of, actually dealing with the accusations.
And then he kept name-dropping the Department of Justice. saying they had already cleared him, even though they never said that. They wouldn't tell the committee anything about their investigation either. Gaetz even said the committee had no right to even look into him because the DOJ had already done it.
Which is totally wrong. Of course, the House Ethics Committee is separate. They have to investigate members of Congress, for misconduct. It doesn't matter if there's another investigation going on.
Right, and he knew that. The report makes it clear, but he kept saying it anyway, hoping they'd just give up, I guess. And remember that whole thing with the documents? First, he says it's too much work to hand them over, and then he dumps a ton of random stuff on them, and he's like, see, I cooperated.
So ridiculous, right? Trying to make it look like he was being transparent, but really he was just trying to bury them in paperwork so he wouldn't find anything important.
Exactly, like trying to distract someone while you make a run for it.
And it worked. He was able to stall long enough to resign, just a few weeks before the House could vote on any kind of punishment. By resigning, he basically ended it. The committee couldn't do anything.
It's frustrating. It feels like he figured out how to, I don't know, game the system, and he got away with it.
It really shows how the system has weaknesses and why we need better ways to hold these people accountable, even when they try to, obstruct investigations. Maybe the Ethics Committee needs more power, more authority to make people cooperate and punish them if they don't.
Yeah, maybe resigning shouldn't automatically end an ethics investigation, right? I mean, if someone is accused of doing something really wrong, they should face the consequences, whether they're still in office or not.
Exactly. This whole thing really shows how vulnerable our institutions are. We have to protect them from people who try to take advantage of them for their own gain.
It definitely makes you think. This whole deep dive has been, well, it's been a lot. Honestly, it's left me feeling a little, I don't know, disillusioned.
I get it. It's hard to see people in power abusing it like that, especially when they're supposed to be like the good guys, right? Upholding the law. But it's also a wake-up call. We can't just sit back and assume everything's okay. We have to pay attention, hold our leaders accountable, no matter how powerful they are.
You're right. We can't just be bystanders. We have to demand better. And on that note, I want to thank you all, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive into the Matt Gaetz story. It's been a wild ride, a complex one for sure, but it's important.
It really is. It makes us ask some hard questions about power, accountability, what we expect from our leaders. And it shows us that, we have to keep fighting for transparency and accountability. It's an ongoing thing.
It is. So until next time, keep asking those tough questions. Keep digging deeper. It's how we keep our democracy.